She wore white to my wedding and stood in the front row, smiling. When the vows started, she coughed loudly and winked at my husband. I raised my glass. Waiters passed out envelopes. The one she got made her face drain. She fled before dessert. The hotel receipt slipped from my fingers like a death sentence, floating to the hardwood floor of our bedroom. Room 312 at the downtown Marriott. John's name printed in bold black letters. Tuesday, March 15, 2:47 a.m. The timestamp burned into my retinas as I stood frozen, holding his navy blazer that still smelled faintly of his cologne mixed with something else. Something floral and expensive that definitely wasn't mine. I had been preparing his clothes for dry cleaning, the same domestic routine I'd performed hundreds of times before. But this Tuesday morning was different. This Tuesday morning, my entire world collapsed with the crinkle of thermal paper between my trembling fingers. "Working late again, honey," he had said that night, kissing my forehead with lips that now felt like they belonged to a stranger. "Big presentation tomorrow. Don't wait up." The lies came so easily to him. So smoothly. So perfectly rehearsed. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of courage and justice. If you believe that truth should triumph over deception, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I sank onto our bed, the same bed where we'd planned our wedding just weeks ago, spreading fabric samples across the white comforter, laughing about seating arrangements and menu choices. The same bed where he'd whispered promises about our future, about growing old together, about the children we'd have someday. My hands shook as I picked up the receipt again, studying every detail as if it might transform into something innocent. But there was no mistaking it. The charge was for one night, one room, and it was definitely his credit card. The same card we'd used to book our honeymoon flights to Italy. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd been at home, probably practicing my wedding vows or obsessing over centerpiece arrangements, John had been at a hotel with another woman. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it nearly stopped beating. I needed more. I needed to know everything. Our home office became my command center over the next 3 days. I pulled our shared phone records, scrolling through months of calls and text messages with the dedication of a forensic accountant. There it was, a number that appeared regularly, always during his supposed late work nights or weekend business trips. The calls lasted anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour, intimate conversations that should have been happening with his future wife. The cloud account revealed even more devastating evidence. John thought he'd been clever deleting messages from his phone, but our family sharing plan kept everything synchronized. I watched months of my marriage dissolve in real time as I read through deleted conversations filled with pet names, promises, and explicit details that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you tonight, gorgeous. Emily has no idea. She's too busy with wedding planning to notice. You're all I think about during these boring dinners with her." Each message felt like a physical blow. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he dismissed our relationship as something boring and insignificant, cut deeper than any dramatic confession could have. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single mistake. This was months of calculated deception, a complete double life that made me question every memory we'd ever shared. Thursday evening arrived with its usual domestic rhythm. John showered while I prepared dinner, the sound of running water providing cover for my investigation. I'd been examining his work shirts more carefully now, looking for evidence I'd previously missed in my trusting naivete. The coral lipstick stain on his white collar was faint but unmistakable. My hands trembled as I held the shirt up to the light, photographing the evidence with my phone. The flash illuminated my wedding ring, a painful reminder of promises that had already been broken before they were even made. The lipstick was expensive. I recognized the undertone from department store displays. Coral Passion, probably MAC or Charlotte Tilbury. Definitely not a drugstore brand. This woman had taste, money, and apparently no shame about marking her territory on my husband's clothing. I spent that night researching the phone number, using every reverse lookup service and social media platform I could find. The digital breadcrumbs led me down a rabbit hole that ended with a face that would haunt me for months. Evelyn Morrison. 28 years old, marketing executive at a downtown firm. Stunning in that effortless way that made ordinary women feel invisible. Her Instagram feed was a carefully curated collection of success and sophistication. Wine tastings, charity galas, exotic vacations. And there, nestled between posts about her promotion and her weekend in Napa, was a photo of her engagement ring. My blood turned to ice as I read the comments. Congratulations poured in from friends and colleagues, celebrating her upcoming marriage to someone named Marcus. She was engaged. She was planning her own wedding while destroying mine. But the most chilling discovery came when I scrolled deeper into her posts. Photos of her at business dinners, always perfectly dressed, always holding a glass of wine. And in 3 separate photos, I spotted the same coral lipstick that had stained John's collar. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Evelyn wasn't just having an affair with my husband. She was living a complete double life, lying to her own fiancé while systematically destroying my marriage. The calculating nature of her deception revealed a level of manipulation that made me physically ill. Saturday morning brought the final insult. I was checking our wedding venue's social media page when I saw it. Our wedding invitation photographed and posted to Evelyn's Instagram story. The elegant script that had taken me weeks to choose was now a prop in her sick game. She'd added a laughing emoji as if my approaching marriage was some kind of private joke. The comments from her friends were equally devastating. Can't wait to see you there. You're going to look amazing. Love a good wedding party. She was planning to attend my wedding. She was going to sit in those chairs I'd agonized over choosing, eat the food I'd spent months selecting, and watch me marry the man she'd been sharing for months. The audacity was breathtaking. I screenshot everything, my fingers moving with mechanical precision as I documented each piece of evidence. The hotel receipt, the phone records, the lipstick stain, the social media posts. All of it carefully saved and organized like a prosecutor building a case. Because that's exactly what I was doing. As I sat in our kitchen that evening watching John eat the dinner I'd prepared while he checked his phone, probably texting her, something fundamental shifted inside me. The naive woman who'd trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. If Evelyn Morrison wanted to play games at my wedding, I would make sure she got exactly what she deserved. But it wouldn't be the victory she was expecting. It would be complete and utter destruction witnessed by everyone who mattered. The perfect life I'd built was crumbling, but from its ashes, I would create something far more satisfying. Justice served cold, public, and absolutely devastating. My wedding day was still 2 weeks away. That gave me just enough time to orchestrate the perfect revenge. The business card felt heavy in my palm as I dialed the number. Davidson Investigations, 24 years of experience in matrimonial cases. The receptionist's voice was professional, almost clinical as she scheduled my appointment for the following morning. I'd chosen them specifically because their online reviews mentioned discretion and thoroughness, 2 qualities I desperately needed. Walking into their downtown office felt like crossing a threshold I could never uncross. The waiting room smelled of leather and coffee, decorated with certificates and commendations that spoke to their success in uncovering uncomfortable truths. When Margaret Davidson called my name, her firm handshake and direct gaze told me I'd made the right choice. I need everything, I told her, sliding a manila folder across her mahogany desk. Every meeting, every lie, every secret. Money is no object. Margaret's gray eyes studied the evidence I'd already gathered. The hotel receipt, the phone records, the social media screenshots. She nodded slowly, recognizing the thoroughness of my amateur investigation. You've done excellent preliminary work, Mrs. Carter. Give me 1 week. That week felt like a lifetime. I maintained my routine, attended final wedding dress fittings, confirmed catering details, all while my private investigator dismantled every lie John and Evelyn had constructed. Margaret called me Thursday afternoon with results that exceeded my worst fears. You need to see this in person, she said, her voice carrying an unusual tension. The photographs spread across her conference table told a story more devastating than I'd imagined. John and Evelyn entering the Marriott together, captured from multiple angles. Timestamps showing they'd been meeting there twice weekly for 4 months. But the most shocking discovery wasn't about their affair. It was about the elaborate deception Evelyn was orchestrating beyond our marriage. She's been purchasing pregnancy tests online, Margaret explained, pointing to printed receipts from her investigation. Specifically, tests that can be manipulated to show false positive results. She's also been using photo editing software to create fake ultrasound images and medical documents. My hands trembled as I examined the evidence. Invoices for fake pregnancy tests, browser history showing tutorials for medical document forgery, and most damning of all, drafts of text messages to two different men, each claiming to carry their child. She's telling her fiancé Marcus that she's pregnant with his baby, Margaret continued, while simultaneously telling your husband that their affair resulted in pregnancy. She's using this lie to manipulate both men, pressuring Marcus into marriage while convincing John to leave you. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. Evelyn wasn't just destroying my marriage. She was systematically manipulating multiple lives with fabricated pregnancies. The scope of her deception revealed a sociopathic level of planning that made my stomach turn. There's more, Margaret said, pulling out another folder. I traced her credit card purchases. She's been buying expensive maternity clothes and pregnancy books, posting photos on social media to maintain the illusion. She's even scheduled fake doctor's appointments, using her lunch breaks to maintain the charade. I studied the timeline Margaret had constructed. Every lie, every manipulation, every calculated move designed to control the men in her life while maintaining her image as a successful, devoted woman. The pregnancy lie was her masterpiece. A single deception that could secure her future with Marcus while using John as her backup plan. The decision to contact Marcus wasn't easy, but justice demanded it. Through encrypted messaging apps and anonymous email accounts, I reached out to Evelyn's unsuspecting fiancé. His initial skepticism quickly dissolved when I provided irrefutable evidence of his fiancé's deception. His first message back was heartbreaking. We've been planning the nursery. I've been reading parenting books. How could she do this? Marcus revealed details that painted an even darker picture of Evelyn's manipulation. She'd been pressuring him to buy a larger house, increase his life insurance and merge their finances, all supposedly for their growing family. He'd been working overtime to afford the future she'd fabricated, sacrificing his health and happiness for a child that never existed. She scheduled our wedding for next month, he wrote. Said she wanted to be married before the baby came. I've been stressed about affording everything, working 70-hour weeks to give her the life she deserves. Our anonymous correspondence evolved into a collaboration between two victims seeking justice. Marcus had access to Evelyn's apartment, her personal belongings, and most importantly, evidence of her deception that I could never obtain. Together we began building an airtight case against the woman who had destroyed both our futures. Tuesday afternoon I drove to the downtown Marriott, my heart pounding as I approached the scene of their betrayal. The lobby was elegant and impersonal, filled with business travelers and tourists who had no idea they were walking through the ruins of my marriage. The desk clerk, a kind woman named Patricia, remembered the regular Tuesday night guests immediately. Room 312, she said with a knowing look. They've been coming here for months. Always paid in cash after the first visit, probably trying to hide it from their spouses. Patricia's sympathy was genuine as she provided additional receipts and security footage timestamps. She'd witnessed their routine, seen them laughing and touching in ways that left no doubt about their relationship. Her detailed accounts filled gaps in my timeline, confirming that their affair had been going on far longer than I'd initially suspected. She always seemed so confident, Patricia said, shaking her head. Acted like she owned the place. Made jokes about how easy it was to fool people. I always felt sorry for whoever was being hurt by their lies. The hotel's business center became my temporary headquarters as I compiled evidence and cross-referenced timelines. Every receipt, every timestamp, every witness account painted a clearer picture of systematic betrayal that went far beyond simple infidelity. With my wedding just days away, I began orchestrating Evelyn's exposure with military precision. The evidence was professionally printed on heavy cardstock, each photograph and document selected for maximum impact. I chose elegant cream-colored envelopes that matched my wedding's color scheme. If Evelyn wanted to make my wedding about her, I would give her exactly that. The local print shop owner, Mr. Chin, worked overtime to perfect every detail. Gold foil seals, premium paper, professional binding that made each envelope look like an expensive wedding favor. He asked no questions, understanding from my demeanor that this was serious business requiring absolute discretion. I spent hours arranging the contents of each envelope for psychological impact. The hotel receipt would establish the affair, the photographs would confirm the physical relationship, but the fake pregnancy test bearing my name would deliver the final devastating blow. A mirror of her own deception that would expose her manipulation tactics to everyone present. Marcus confirmed his role in our plan through encrypted messages. He would arrive at the reception with Evelyn's real negative pregnancy test, the one she'd hidden that morning before applying makeup over its results for her social media posts. His timing had to be perfect, arriving just as the initial shock was settling, delivering the final proof that would make her denials impossible. The irony was beautiful in its cruelty. Evelyn had chosen my wedding as her stage for triumph, planning to humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered. Instead, she would become the star of her own destruction, exposed as a manipulative liar in the most public way possible. As I sealed the final envelope, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I was planning, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The woman who thought she could destroy multiple lives for her selfish gain was about to discover that some games have consequences she never imagined. The morning light filtered through the hotel suite's gauze curtains as I sat at the mahogany vanity, watching my reflection apply lipstick with mechanical precision. Rose petals, the same shade I'd chosen months ago for its romantic symbolism. How naive that woman seemed now, the one who believed in fairy tale endings and happily ever after. My bridesmaids fluttered around the suite like pastel butterflies, their voices a constant stream of excitement about flower arrangements and weather forecasts. Sarah adjusted my veil for the third time while Jessica debated which earrings complemented my dress better. Their joy felt distant, like watching happiness through bulletproof glass. "Emily, you're glowing," my sister Claire said, squeezing my shoulders. "This is going to be the most beautiful wedding." If only she knew how beautiful the justice would be. Hidden beneath layers of silk and tulle in my wardrobe bag were the instruments of Evelyn's destruction. 50 cream-colored envelopes, each one sealed with gold foil and containing evidence that would shatter her carefully constructed world. I'd spent the previous evening arranging them by table number, ensuring every guest would receive their revelation simultaneously. The fake pregnancy test had been particularly satisfying to create. Using Evelyn's own tactics against her, I'd manipulated a standard test to show positive results, then carefully written my name where the date should appear. The symbolism was perfect. She would recognize her own methods being turned against her while everyone else witnessed her preferred weapon of manipulation. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Found it. Hidden behind her jewelry box just like you suspected. My hands are shaking but I'm ready." I typed back quickly, "Stay strong." She chose this path when she decided to destroy innocent people. His response came immediately. "I can't believe I was planning to spend my life with someone capable of this level of deception. Thank you for showing me who she really is." The tragedy of Marcus's situation wasn't lost on me. He'd been working double shifts, sacrificing his health and happiness to prepare for a future built entirely on lies. Evelyn had stolen months of his life, manipulated his love into a weapon against his own well-being. Today he would finally see her true face. At 10:30 I excused myself from the bridesmaid chaos, claiming I needed a private moment to gather my thoughts. The truth was far more calculated. I had a confrontation to conduct. John arrived at the bridal suite 15 minutes later, looking handsome in his charcoal tuxedo but carrying tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there during our engagement photos. He'd probably spent the morning wondering if I suspected anything, never imagining the depth of my knowledge. "You look beautiful, Em," he said, his voice carrying forced enthusiasm. I turned from the window where I'd been watching early guests arrive, my wedding dress rustling with the movement. "Do I, John? Beautiful enough to keep your attention? Or am I still too boring for your taste?" His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" Without breaking eye contact, I reached into my purse and placed the hotel receipt on the vanity between us. Then the photographs of his lipstick-stained collar. Finally, printouts of his deleted text messages, the words that had called our relationship boring and dismissed me as naive. John's knees buckled and he sank into the velvet armchair near the window. "Emily, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "Can you explain 4 months of lies? Can you explain telling Evelyn that I'm too busy with wedding planning to notice your betrayal?" Can you explain how you've been living a double life while I planned our future? Tears streamed down his face, but I felt nothing. The man crying in front of me was a stranger wearing my fiancé's face. It meant nothing, he whispered. It was just physical. I love you, Emily. I want to marry you. No, John. You want to marry the idea of me. The stable, predictable woman who won't question your lies or challenge your deceptions. But that woman died the moment I found your hotel receipt. He looked up with desperate eyes. What do you want me to do? I'll end things with her. I'll do anything to fix this. Oh, you're going to end things with her, I said, smoothing my dress with deliberate calm. But not the way you think. You have one choice. Walk down that aisle, say your vows, and play the role of devoted groom until I give you permission to speak. Or I can call off this wedding right now and explain to 300 guests exactly why their afternoon has been wasted. Emily, please. Those are your options, John. Play along with my plan or face immediate humiliation. Choose wisely. The terror in his eyes told me he understood the gravity of his situation. He nodded slowly, his face a mask of resignation and fear. After he left, I returned to the window, watching guests stream into our venue. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to give them the most memorable wedding they'd ever attend, just not for the reasons they expected. At 11:45, a white Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway. Evelyn emerged like a vision designed to steal attention, her dress a bold statement of disrespect that made several early arrivals whisper among themselves. She'd chosen cream silk with a plunging neckline and a hem that barely reached her knees. Inappropriate for a wedding guest but perfect for a woman trying to upstage the bride. From my third-floor window, I watched her survey the venue with predatory satisfaction. She adjusted her dress, checked her reflection in the car window, and applied fresh lipstick, Coral Passion, the same shade that had stained John's collar. Her confidence was breathtaking, the self-assurance of someone who believed her lies were undetectable. She positioned herself in the front row, exactly where I'd expected. Close enough to catch John's eye during the ceremony, positioned for maximum disruption when she began her planned performance. Her smile was sharp and knowing as she greeted other guests, playing the role of innocent wedding attendee while plotting destruction. My maid of honor knocked softly before entering. Emily, it's time for final preparations. The photographer wants a few more shots before we head downstairs. I nodded, taking one last look at Evelyn's confident posture. She had no idea that her final performance was about to become her complete annihilation. The head waiter, David, appeared at my door exactly as planned. We'd rehearsed this moment yesterday, going over every detail until the timing was flawless. Mrs. Carter, the envelopes are distributed according to your seating chart. Every table has their assignments. When you give the signal during your toast, we'll begin immediately. Perfect, David. Remember, simultaneously. Every guest receives their envelope at exactly the same moment. Understood, ma'am. The staff is ready. I handed him an extra envelope marked with Evelyn's table number. Make sure she gets this one personally. I want to see her face when she opens it. As David left with the final envelope, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The woman who thought she could destroy my marriage while living her own lie was about to discover that some games have consequences she never imagined. The justice I'd planned would be swift, public, and absolutely devastating. The chapel doors opened with ceremonial grandeur, revealing 300 faces turned toward me in anticipation. The string quartet began Pachelbel's canon, the same piece I'd dreamed of walking down the aisle to since childhood. But this wasn't the fairy tale moment I'd once imagined. This was the opening act of the most elaborate revenge ever orchestrated at a wedding. My father's arm felt steady beneath mine as we began our procession, his proud smile genuine despite his ignorance of what was truly happening. The ivory silk of my dress whispered against marble floors as we moved past rows of family and friends, their faces beaming with the kind of joy reserved for weddings and christenings. But my eyes were fixed on one face in particular. Evelyn sat in the third row, exactly where she'd positioned herself for maximum visibility. Her cream dress was a deliberate violation of wedding etiquette, designed to draw attention and establish dominance. As our eyes met, she lifted her champagne flute, champagne she'd helped herself to before the ceremony even began, and offered a mock toast with the kind of smile that belonged on a predator. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't content to simply attend my wedding. She was performing her own show, ensuring everyone noticed her beauty, her confidence, her complete lack of respect for the occasion. Other guests had already begun whispering about her inappropriate attire and behavior, but she seemed to feed on their attention. I returned her smile with one of my own, serene, knowing, and infinitely more dangerous than she could comprehend. Father handed me to John at the altar, his kiss on my cheek accompanied by a whispered, "I love you, sweetheart." The irony of his blessing on a marriage already destroyed by betrayal wasn't lost on me, but I squeezed his hand with genuine affection. He deserved better than to discover his daughter's heartbreak at her own wedding. John's hands trembled as he took mine, his earlier confrontation with reality evident in the tightness around his eyes. He looked handsome in his charcoal tuxedo, playing the role of devoted groom with Oscar-worthy performance skills. But I could see the fear beneath his composed expression, the understanding that he was no longer in control of his own narrative. The officiant, Reverend Matthews, began with traditional words about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. His voice carried the authority of 30 years conducting ceremonies, completely unaware that he was presiding over the most unconventional wedding of his career. As we reached the exchange of vows, Evelyn began her planned disruption. A theatrical cough echoed through the chapel, loud enough to interrupt the Reverend mid-sentence. Every head turned toward the sound, finding Evelyn covering her mouth with false modesty while her eyes sparkled with malicious amusement. She repeated the performance twice more, each cough perfectly timed to maximum disruption. "Excuse me," she said in a stage whisper that carried throughout the sacred space. Something caught in my throat. But her piece de resistance came during John's vows. As he spoke about faithfulness and eternal love, words that now tasted like ash in the air, Evelyn made deliberate eye contact with him and winked. Fully. Provocatively. With the kind of intimate familiarity that left no doubt about their relationship. The guests' murmurs rippled through the chapel like disturbed water. This wasn't accidental rudeness. This was calculated sabotage designed to humiliate me on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Elderly relatives frowned with disapproval while younger guests exchanged shocked glances, all wondering who this woman was and why she felt entitled to disrupt our ceremony. But instead of the devastation Evelyn expected to see on my face, I maintained perfect composure. My smile never wavered, my voice remained steady, and my vows flowed with practiced grace. Because I knew something she didn't. Her moment of perceived triumph was actually the final nail in her own coffin. The reception transition happened with military precision. Guests moved from chapel to ballroom, their conversations buzzing with speculation about the inappropriate woman who'd disrupted our ceremony. Evelyn glided among them like a socialite at a gallery opening, clearly energized by the attention her behavior had generated. She positioned herself at a prominent table near the dance floor, her body language radiating confidence and satisfaction. She'd achieved exactly what she'd come for. She'd stolen focus from the bride, demonstrated her power over the groom, and established herself as the most memorable person at the event. What she didn't notice was Marcus entering through the service entrance, his face grim with determination as he took his assigned position near the kitchen doors. What she couldn't see were the wait staff making final preparations, checking their watches and waiting for the signal that would transform her victory into catastrophic defeat. The ballroom buzzed with typical wedding reception energy. My college friends admired the centerpieces while John's business associates made small talk about golf handicaps and stock portfolios. The elderly relatives found their assigned tables and began the traditional commentary about how lovely everything looked and how proud they were of the happy couple. Evelyn held court at table 7, spinning some elaborate story that had her companions laughing and hanging on every word. She'd introduced herself as a business associate of John's, neglecting to mention the nature of their after-hours collaboration. Her performance was flawless, charming, vivacious, the kind of woman who made others feel slightly inadequate by comparison. When the time came for toasts, the traditional clinking of silverware against crystal glasses brought the room to attention. My maid of honor offered sweet words about friendship and future happiness. John's best man shared embarrassing college stories that had everyone laughing and applauding. Then it was my turn. I rose with the fluid grace of someone completely in control, my champagne flute catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. The room fell silent with that particular hush reserved for brides' speeches, 300 faces turned toward me in expectation of heartfelt sentiment and grateful tears. Instead, they were about to witness the most devastating exposure in wedding history. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this special day," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's acoustic-friendly space. "Your presence means everything to John and me as we begin this new chapter of our lives." Evelyn raised her own glass with exaggerated enthusiasm, her smile wide and predatory as she prepared to savor my emotional moment. She had no idea that in 30 seconds her entire world would collapse in the most public way imaginable. "Marriage is about trust," I continued, letting my gaze sweep across the room before landing briefly on Evelyn's confident face. "It's about honesty, commitment, and the courage to face truth together, no matter how difficult that truth might be." With practiced elegance, I raised my champagne flute higher, the signal I'd arranged with David and his team. Across the ballroom, waiters appeared as if materialized from thin air, each carrying silver trays loaded with cream-colored envelopes. Evelyn's smile faltered slightly as she watched the coordinated distribution begin. Confusion flickered across her features as every table received their elegant packages simultaneously, the golden seals catching the light like tiny warnings of approaching doom. The envelope slipped from Evelyn's manicured fingers like a death sentence, its golden seal broken and its contents scattered across the pristine white tablecloth. Time seemed suspended as she stared at the evidence sprawled before her. The hotel receipt with its damning timestamp, the photograph of coral lipstick staining John's collar, and most devastatingly, the pregnancy test bearing my name where the date should be. Her champagne flute slipped from nerveless fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor in a sound that seemed to echo her crumbling composure. The confident smile that had graced her face moments earlier dissolved into something approaching terror as her brain processed the magnitude of her exposure. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible above the sudden hush that had fallen over table 7. Her hands shook as she gathered the photographs, as if hiding them could somehow undo their revelation. This can't be." But the evidence was undeniable, professionally printed and impossible to dismiss as forgery. Every detail was crisp, clear, and absolutely damning. Around the ballroom, a symphony of shock began to build. Mrs. Henderson from the country club let out an audible gasp as she opened her envelope, her pearl necklace catching the light as her hand flew to her throat. The sound rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water, followed by the rustle of paper and sharp intakes of breath as 300 guests discovered the same devastating truth simultaneously. "Oh my goodness," someone whispered near the cake table. "Is this real?" came another voice from across the room. The elegant wedding reception transformed before my eyes into something resembling a courtroom where the verdict had just been read. Conversations died mid-sentence as people studied the evidence, their faces shifting from confusion to understanding to judgment. The social elite of our community, people who prided themselves on discretion and propriety, found themselves witnesses to the most scandalous exposure they'd ever encountered. John's business partner, Robert, held up the hotel receipt with the kind of clinical detachment reserved for examining financial documents. His wife, Margaret, studied the lipstick photograph with the intensity of a detective, her expression growing more disgusted by the second. "That's definitely not Emily's shade," Margaret said to no one in particular, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. At the young professionals table, my former colleague Sarah was explaining the significance of the fake pregnancy test to her confused husband. "She made it look like Emily was claiming to be pregnant with John's baby," Sarah said, her voice filled with dawning understanding. "It's exactly what manipulative people do, they accuse others of their own tactics." The revelation created a domino effect of understanding throughout the room. Guests who had initially been confused by Evelyn's disruption during the ceremony now saw it in a new light. Her inappropriate behavior wasn't random rudeness. It was the calculated cruelty of someone who believed she held all the cards. Evelyn's table companions had backed away from her as if betrayal were contagious. The charming business associate they'd been laughing with minutes earlier had transformed into someone they no longer recognized. Their faces showed the particular kind of revulsion reserved for people who discovered they'd been lied to by someone they'd trusted. But the real fireworks were yet to come. The reception hall's double doors burst open with the force of a man who had nothing left to lose. Marcus strode into the ballroom like an avenging angel, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled and his eyes blazing with the kind of fury that comes from having your entire future revealed as an elaborate lie. In his trembling hands he held a small white plastic stick, the original negative pregnancy test that Evelyn had hidden in her jewelry box that very morning. "Looking for this, darling?" Marcus's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade, his usual gentle tone replaced by something sharp and dangerous. Every head turned toward his dramatic entrance, 300 guests becoming an audience for the most devastating confrontation in wedding history. Marcus's face was a mask of betrayal and rage, the kind of expression that comes from discovering the person you love most has been systematically destroying your life. Evelyn's remaining color drained completely, leaving her looking like a ghost in her inappropriate white dress. She rose unsteadily from her chair, her confidence completely shattered as she faced the man whose life she'd been manipulating for months. "Marcus, I can explain," she started, but her voice cracked on his name. "Explain what?" Marcus demanded, holding the pregnancy test above his head like evidence in a trial. "Explain how you've been lying about carrying my child. Explain how you made me work myself to exhaustion to afford a future that was built on complete fiction. Explain how you manipulated me into proposing because you claimed we had created a life together." The room watched in stunned fascination as Evelyn's web of lies unraveled in real time. This wasn't just about her affair with John. This was about a systematic pattern of manipulation that had destroyed multiple lives. "I was going to tell you," Evelyn said weakly, but even she seemed to realize how pathetic the words sounded. "When?" Marcus's laugh was bitter and sharp. "After our wedding? After I'd signed over half my assets to you? After you'd secured your financial future by lying about the most sacred thing two people can create together." Evelyn tried to move toward him, her hands outstretched in a gesture of pleading, but Marcus stepped back as if her touch would contaminate him. The movement brought her face to face with John, who had been standing frozen near the head table, his own world collapsing as the depth of Evelyn's deception became clear. "You told me she didn't mean anything to you," Evelyn said to John, her voice rising with desperation. "You said you were going to leave her after the wedding. You promised me." "I promised you nothing," John said, his voice hollow with shock. "I never said I'd leave Emily. I never promised you anything except secrets and lies." The triangle of betrayal was complete. Marcus destroyed by fabricated pregnancy, John exposed as an unfaithful coward, and Evelyn revealed as a master manipulator whose schemes had finally collapsed under their own weight. The ballroom erupted in a chaos of whispered conversations and shocked exclamations. Some guests rose from their tables to get a better view of the unfolding drama, while others seemed frozen in their seats, unable to process the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Evelyn stood alone in the center of it all, her white dress no longer a symbol of her intended triumph but a stark reminder of her complete defeat. The woman who had orchestrated elaborate lies to control multiple men now faced the consequences of her actions in the most public forum imaginable. Her carefully constructed world of manipulation had crumbled completely, leaving her exposed and defenseless before an audience of 300 witnesses who would ensure her reputation never recovered. The silence that followed the explosive confrontation was deafening. Evelyn stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, her designer dress now resembling a costume from a play where she'd forgotten her lines. The confidence that had carried her through months of deception had evaporated completely, leaving behind a woman who looked smaller, younger, and utterly defeated. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, searching for a friendly face, an ally, anyone who might offer support or understanding. Instead, she found 300 pairs of eyes staring back with expressions ranging from disgust to pity to cold judgment. The social elite she tried so hard to impress now saw her exactly as she was, a manipulative fraud who had built her life on elaborate lies. "I need to leave," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Evelyn's first step toward the exit was unsteady, her usual graceful movements replaced by the awkward stumble of someone whose world had just collapsed. The whispers began immediately, a low buzz of conversation that followed her retreat like a swarm of bees. "Can you believe she faked a pregnancy? That poor man worked himself to death for a child that never existed. Did you see how she disrupted the ceremony? What kind of person does that?" Each comment was a nail in the coffin of her reputation. By the time she reached the ballroom doors, her carefully constructed social standing was already in ruins. The country club memberships, the charity board positions, the professional networks. All of it would crumble once this story spread through our interconnected community. She paused at the threshold, perhaps hoping for some miraculous intervention, some way to undo the damage that had been done. But there was no going back from this level of exposure. The evidence was too clear, the witnesses too numerous, the betrayal too complete. As the doors closed behind her fleeing figure, the ballroom erupted in animated conversation. Guests clustered around tables, dissecting every detail of what they'd witnessed, sharing their own observations about Evelyn's behavior throughout the evening. My mother approached with tears in her eyes, her maternal instincts finally understanding the depth of pain I'd been hiding. "Emily, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you through this." "I needed to handle it my way, Mom," I said, accepting her embrace but feeling emotionally drained despite my victory. Some battles have to be fought alone. The next 72 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of consequences. Marcus, true to his word, ended his engagement that very night. He packed Evelyn's belongings and left them outside her apartment with a note explaining that any further contact would be handled through his attorney. The news spread through our social media networks with viral speed. Screenshots of the evidence appeared on private group chats, shared with captions expressing shock and outrage. Evelyn's professional reputation crumbled as colleagues distanced themselves from someone capable of such elaborate deception. Her marketing firm conducted a quiet investigation and discovered she'd been using company resources for personal matters, including printing fake medical documents and coordinating her deceptive schemes during work hours. The termination was swift and absolute, with no possibility of positive references for future employment. John faced his own reckoning as friends and family processed his role in the betrayal. His business partnerships suffered as colleagues questioned his integrity, wondering what other lies he might be telling in professional settings. The man who had seemed so confident and successful revealed himself to be capable of systematic deception, causing people to re-evaluate every interaction they'd ever had with him. But while watching Evelyn's downfall provided a certain satisfaction, I discovered that revenge, no matter how perfectly executed, couldn't heal the deeper wounds of betrayal. The hollow victory left me emotionally exhausted and questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and human nature. Dr. Sarah Chen's office became my sanctuary in the weeks that followed. The therapist's calm demeanor and insightful questions helped me navigate the complex emotions that came with simultaneously achieving justice and losing my marriage. Her office, decorated with soft blues and greens, became the place where I slowly began to rebuild my sense of self. "Revenge can provide closure," Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions, "but healing requires a different kind of work. It requires forgiving yourself for the trust you gave to someone who didn't deserve it." The counseling sessions revealed layers of trauma I hadn't even recognized. The gaslighting, the subtle manipulation, the way John had made me question my own perceptions, all of it had left deeper scars than the simple act of infidelity. Recovery meant learning to trust my instincts again, to recognize the warning signs I'd missed, and to rebuild my self-worth independent of any romantic relationship. My true friends rallied around me with the kind of support that restored my faith in human decency. Sarah from college spent countless evenings with me, helping me pack away reminders of my marriage while sharing stories that made me laugh despite everything. My sister Claire flew in from Seattle and stayed for 2 weeks, her practical nature helping me navigate the legal and financial complexities of divorce. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. John, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting someone who had orchestrated such a comprehensive exposure of his lies, agreed to a settlement that was more than fair. His guilt over the public humiliation made him surprisingly generous with assets and apologetic in his communications. 6 months after the wedding that changed everything, I sat in my new apartment, a sun-filled space that felt like hope made tangible. The walls were painted in colors I'd chosen alone, decorated with art that reflected my personal taste rather than compromise. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. The story of Evelyn's exposure had become legendary in our social circles, a cautionary tale that mothers told their daughters about recognizing manipulation and trusting their instincts. Her name became synonymous with the kind of calculated cruelty that destroys innocent people for selfish gain. Evelyn herself had seemingly vanished from our community entirely. Rumors suggested she'd moved to another city, changed her name, or retreated to family in a different state. Whatever the truth, her absence felt like a wound finally healing, a toxicity removed from the environment we all shared. Marcus, meanwhile, had begun the slow process of rebuilding his life. We'd maintained occasional contact through encrypted messages, two survivors of the same emotional disaster supporting each other's healing. His recovery seemed faster than mine, perhaps because his betrayal had been exposed and ended before he'd legally bound himself to his manipulator. As I reflected on that devastating wedding day, I realized that while Evelyn had failed to steal my husband or destroy my life, she had inadvertently given me something valuable, the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The woman who had orchestrated such perfect revenge was someone I barely recognized, yet someone I was proud to have become. The perfect life I'd thought I wanted had been an illusion, built on foundations of deception and compromise. The life I was building now was smaller, quieter, but completely authentic. And that, I realized, was worth far more than any fairy tale ending. If this story of perfect wedding day revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Emily raised her glass as the signal, watching Evelyn's confidence crumble as those envelopes were distributed. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.